All right, so we start Plato and finish Plato today. So I just want to go over some of you were really struggling with the same-sex relationships. Not just that it's same-sex, it's that it's, kind of a younger guy with an older man. And yes, I mean, this was very common, right? I think I mentioned that in my introductory video. This was very common in ancient Greece as an initiation process, right? Now, mind you, they weren't children, right? They were, probably in their late teens, but it was very common practice. Now, it's interesting that Socrates actually doesn't buy into it, right? I don't know if you read all the way till the end when Alcibiades, who is his lover, comes. And you can really, I mean, he's not even his lover. He tried to be his lover, right? And Socrates turned him down. And there's an implicit critique in what he says to Alcibiades. There's a critique of this system, right? Where he says, why should I exchange my gold for your, I forget what he said, your medal or something like that, right? So basically saying, I don't buy into this kind of barter, into this kind of exchange, right, of sexual favor for my wisdom. He doesn't buy into it, right? So he's not really part of that system, and you can sense a discrete critique of it. So if it makes you feel better to know that at least one person was uncomfortable with this along with you, and that was Socrates, then yeah. So yeah, definitely. But for the most part, right, this same sex was absolutely normal. It was a rite of initiation and so forth. It was very different from, of course, our society, right? Rudolph, go ahead.
And it shows you that the flesh won that game, because this kind of pederasty went on for another 500 years after Socrates died. So it's, even though he really was against it and had some moral issues with it, Greek society continued to practice for another half century plus, I think 800 years or so.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. That was really a common thing. Good. All right. So we're going to do four speeches today. We're going to do Pausanias. I'm going to put them in the chat, the names, so you can write them down correctly. Pausanias, Aristophanes, Agathon, and then we'll end with Diotima. So in the first part of the hour, we're going to do these three guys. And then in the second part, we're going to go and look at Diotima. So let's start with Pausanias. Okay, so very simple. He begins, right? He begins by talking about two kinds of love. Can anyone tell me what they are? What are the two kinds of love you see in Pausanias? Remember to raise only your virtual hand because I can't see you. So what are the two kinds of love that Pausanias is talking about? And you can find those on page 13. So go to page 13. Tell me what you see. What are the two kinds of love that you see on page 13? And somebody please answer, because we don't have all day. So if you know the answer, speak up or put it in the chat. Okay, Olarte, go ahead.
Doesn't he start with the boy and older man relationship?
Yes, and which one, how does he call each love? Do you remember? Which one is low, which one is high? Do you remember?
Lover, is that what you mean? Lover is the older man.
So yeah, so when you're in love with an older man, is that a higher love or is that a lower love? I guess that's the question.
It's a higher love.
Okay, good. And then the other love of the boy, right, is the lower love. Very good. Okay, right, so you have two kinds of love. So make sure you write this down. You have a higher love, you have a lower love. The higher love is when you fall in love as a man, right, with a man, right, with another older man. I'm precise, I make the precision, right? And then the lower love is when you fall in love with either a woman or one of those teens, right, that are in the party, right, one of those younger guys. So, okay, so here's my question to you. Why does Pausanias say that the higher type of love, the more sophisticated type of love is when you love an older man? And you can, if you remember the story that I told you of Plato's cave, right? You should be able to see right away what's going on. Pausanias is very much in line with Plato's thought here. So why, so I'll say my question again, why is it that higher love is the love of an older man? Who can tell me the reasoning here? You guys are so, hurry up. Need an answer. So let's remember the story of the cave. Garcia, you want to try? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself before. I was gonna say, would higher love be like, I'm sorry, so the younger love would be the older love, correct?
No,
That's the higher love?
yes, when you're with an older man, it's a higher love, yes.
Would it be because as an older man, you have more wisdom in which you can share to the youth, basically?
Okay, good. And what's the problem with the woman and the younger man? Why are they, you know?
I think it's because of how a younger man and a woman, since they're both like, maybe it's because like they now have that maturity with it, or that sense of like that sense of realistic maturity. It's more of like, since you're both the same age, you have both the same mindset.
Yeah, excellent, right? Absolutely. Okay, so let me summarize, right? The higher love of the older man, right, is higher. Why? Because it takes you out of the cave, right? The older man, certainly you're not attracted to his body. You're not attracted to material things when you fall in love with him. The material has no impact on your decision. You are attracted rather to his mind, certainly to his spirit. And this, of course, is a higher attraction. It's an attraction that lifts you out of the cave, right? That brings you beyond the material to the intellectual and the spiritual. Now, the woman and the younger man, right? Because they're both generally uneducated, right? Therefore have no conversation, cannot, inspire you, according to Pausanias, right? And in a way, it's true, right? If you have not been educated, if you are not, what are you going to talk about? The kids, the chicken over there in the street, what are you going to talk about? So that's what he's saying, right? So the woman and the boy, surely it's not their mind you're attracted to. So what are you attracted to? Well, their body. And if you're attracted to their body, you're sinking back into the cave. Your interests are purely material. You are therefore in the lower inferior stratum, right, of love. So that's the rationale, right? That's the reasoning here. Okay, so let's look at a few quotes just so we have those. I want to remind you to take very careful note of these quotes because you will need them for your test. So 2 things, right, for the test, just a quick reminder. Excellent note taking, right? Very detailed as much as you can, and then keeping track of the quotes because you will need to quote in your essay, right? So, okay, so I'm on page 13. I'm gonna quote here. So let me make sure you're all with me. I'm on the first paragraph of page 13, common love. Wave at me if you got it. I have 1, 2, I need one more person. One more person who has it. Okay, thanks. Okay, common love, and make sure you underline these quotes, right? You're gonna need them. Common love is genuinely common and undiscriminating in its effects. This is the kind of love that inferior people feel, right? So if you're in the cave, if you're kind of inferior, you're gonna fall in love in that way. People like this are attracted to women as much as boys and to bodies rather than minds. Okay, that's the quote for that, right? And then it goes to the higher love, which is the 3rd paragraph. Let's see, the other love, are you there? Wave at me. Okay, the other love derives from the heavenly goddess who has nothing of the female in her, but only maleness. I could spend a whole month talking about just this line, right? But moving on. So this love is directed at boys, right? Oh, sorry, continuing. Ooh, where is this higher love? Now I can't see the higher love. Where I thought it was in that paragraph. I'm still talking about boys. Where is the higher love? Can someone help me? I can't find the higher love in my text anymore. Common love is this. The other love derives. I thought that was that. That's why those. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm sorry. Continuing the same place. The goddess is also older and so avoids abusive violence. That's why those inspired with this love are drawn towards the male, feeling affection for what is naturally more vigorous and intelligent, right? So that's the idea here. So, okay, so all right. So it's a little annoying to read, especially if you're a woman, but let's see what we can still learn from this guy, right? It's always my practice, right? When I read a text, no matter how distant it is from my worldview or from my background, right? I'm always going to see where's the gem, what can I learn, right? So what can we learn from this? How can we apply this today? What is one of the most important lessons you're getting from this particular text in your own relationships? Let's hear a little bit what you're gaining. While you do that, I'll look for the last quote. Okay. Okay, while you're thinking, let me add, right, a commentary that he makes on the difference between higher love and lower love, right? So I'm here on page 16, right? So he says, it is better, of course, to love the mind and not only the body, right? And I'll summarize and then I'll read, simply because when you fall in love with the soul or the mind or the spirit of the person, your love lasts forever. No matter how their body is going to morph, right, into different things as they get older, the mind will stay consistent and you always have love for that person. You will always be attracted to that person, right? And also your love will last because that thing that you fell in love with is not going to die, right? So this is what he says here on page 16, top of page 16. Fourth line, a bad man who is with me, wave at me, a bad man. 4 lines from the top of page 16. I need one more wave. One more wave. Thank you. Okay, so he's describing a bad man, right, who falls in love with the lower love. In this connection is the lover of the common type who loves the body rather than the mind. And then he explains why he's low. He is low because he is not constant, because he loves something that is not constant, right? So in a way, he's giving here the secret of a lasting relationship, right? One of the secrets is falling in love with that which is constant in the person, not with that which is not constant. So you want, in essence, the lesson here is you want to make sure when you fall in love that it's not just chemical attraction, right? You want to make sure you're also attracted to their mind, to their inner life, to their spirit. A good test is what kind of conversation do you have, right? This is a great way to know if you have also intellectual chemistry and not just physical chemistry. Are you talking? Many relationships, they're not talking. They're just, so one of the tests you want to, give to the relationship is, what kind of conversation do we have? Do we have chemistry in the level of our conversation, right? Am I stimulated by this person intellectually? Or am I just, enjoying their presence, just sitting there, right? Being beautiful or handsome, right? But am I really enjoying also their inner life, right? And that is the test you want to give yourselves. What is the level of our conversations? Then if the conversation is good, the chemistry is good, and the level of the intellect, you have a winner, according to Pausanias, right? Let me just finish and then I'll get you, Rudolph. Finish reading that line. As soon as the bloom of the body fades, which is what attracted him, he flies away and is gone. Right. So if you wonder why your beloved has left you, probably because they were only interested in the body. And even a gorgeous man or woman, after a while you get bored with the way they look, no matter how hot they are, right? So bringing this grace on all he said and promised. And then this is the key line. But the man who loves goodness of character is constant throughout his life, since he has become united with something constant, right? Okay, Rudolph, enlighten us.
I just wanted to add as a little crutch in this conversation, when you asked what we took away from this, oftentimes in our modern language, I'm sure there are people in our class here who have used that expression. We're using an adjective that is called more like a platonic love, right? We use that word a lot. It's platonic. So when you look at this word platonic, the answer to the question Professor Decan asked, I believe, is exactly in that. When do we use that platonic love? I know the answer, but if somebody else wants to answer, maybe that'll lead you to the core of what you can take away from this text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No.
Platonic usually is used for just friends, right? When you put them in a friend zone. So what are you saying?
No romance, lacking the sexual aspect. It's really just the care and the interest in the intellect, and what you just called, the interesting intellectual stimulation. So that's one of Plato's essences of all his philosophies, I think. And the answer to the question, what you can take away of, if you look at it through this viewing glass, a lot of the text becomes much easier to read.
So in other words, Plato is encouraging a non-physical love. He's saying that's the highest love, the friendship, right, between people. Yeah, okay, that's true. Absolutely, that is very, very typical of Plato. Hold on, I need to pin myself again. This is awful. All the work I got to do over here. Y'all have no idea. So yes, okay. Actually, yes, good point. So just to reiterate what Rudolf said, this is true. The highest love in Plato's mind is not the sexual love. It's the love between friends, right? Who are conversing, who are stimulating each other. So yes, that's an excellent point. And Aristotle, of course, goes further even, right, with this idea. Good. All right, Pausanias, right? Let's see now what we can learn from Aristophanes. And this is the moment with Aristophanes when we are going to delve into the concept of the soulmate, which is very important because I think most of us believe that there is a soulmate, right? Most of us believe there is a soulmate. Most of us are looking for a soulmate. Some of us have given up on the soulmate, but still deep down, if the option presented itself, certainly we would jump at it, right? So this is a very powerful image, archetype, the soulmate, right? We are all in a way looking for what we call our other half, right? We're all longing for that person who will complete us, who will, and Aristophanes is going to talk exactly about that, right? So let's look at the text where he talks about this. I'm on page 23. Okay, does anybody remember the story he tells? It's a kind of parable, right? To describe this psychological phenomenon, right? You don't need to take it literally. He's just describing something deeply ingrained in the human psyche. But what is the story he tells? Can anyone summarize the story that Aristophanes tells us here on page 23? Must I do all the talking? Let's see. All right, I will. All right, so Aristophanes here is talking about, he tells a legend, right? Where originally we were all just one with our beloved. In the very ancient dawn of time, right? We all were one, cleaving to our beloved. And it's interesting, he has different sexual orientations accounted for, right? He has man, woman, woman, man. So he's accounting for the soulmate to be not necessarily the other sex, right? Can be somebody same sex, right? That you're attracted to physically. So we were all joined with our soulmates, and then God, right, or Zeus, became nervous. We were just too powerful when we were thus united, right? And so he decided to cleave us in half. And now, ever since then, we are wandering around looking, right, for our other half. So, very powerful story, right? So, and it really speaks to a deep yearning, right, to a deep psychological yearning that most of us still have had, right? We've all gone through this desire. Is there someone out there? Is there a soulmate? How do I find them, right? So, if it is true, right? Let's assume for 1 second that it is true that we each have a soulmate out there. The $1 million question is going to be this: what do they look like, right? We need to know, because otherwise we will go and try all kinds of people and waste a lot of time, because if we don't know what they look like, we don't know what to look for, correct? And then we will waste time with this person thinking they're the soulmate, and then they do something and then they're like, no, not you. And then we try that one and it doesn't work and we lose 20 years, right? And then we never really find the soulmate, just goes right by us. We die and the soulmate, we haven't met them, right? So it's very important early on, right, to know what the soulmate looks like. And what's interesting about our text is that it gives us a hint of what the soulmate looks like. So I'm going to take you in this text. It's a hint, so it's subtle. But I want you to try, and of course, if we figure this out, this is going to solve a lot of problems. We're going to stop losing time. We're going to stop wasting time. We will know exactly what to look for, and we can easily get with that person without, having to go all kinds of detours, right? So I'm going to read a passage. This is describing the soulmate, but it's subtle, so it's not saying it outright. I want you to listen closely. And then I'm going to ask you, what do you think the soulmate looks like based on this passage? Now I'm going to skip around. I'm going to skip around between page 25 and page 27. So you don't need to write anything down. Just listen carefully. And then tell me at the end of all this, what do you think the soulmate looks like? Okay, ready? Let me see if you're all there. Put your hand in the screen if you're ready to hear what the soulmate looks like. Okay, good. See, I'm always checking on you. I'm always looking. All right. All right, he begins here on page 23. Those who are cut from males go for males, and it's not out of shamelessness that they do this, but because they're bold, brave, masculine, and they welcome the same qualities in others. And then he says, boys who love their male lovers, always welcoming their shared natural character. When a lover of boys meets that very person who is his other half, right? Turning the page, I'm on page 27. If this is the ideal under present circumstances, what comes closest to it must be the best. That is to find a loved one who naturally fits your own character, who is naturally close to us, and who restores us to our original nature. Okay, based on what I read between the lines, right? What does a soulmate look like? You can figure it out. I'm gonna wait on this one. I'm not telling you. You have to say it, otherwise we're just gonna go without knowing. So, I'll put you in gallery view. What does a soulmate look like? Noble, tell us.
The part where he says that the man who loves the other man is probably cut from the same like unit that they were joined together before. It shows that we're looking for ourselves in our soulmate.
Okay, yes, you're pretty much right on. Let me hear what Donaldson has to say. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna suggest that they probably look like you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You guys got it. Good. You're good readers between the lines. So exactly, right? The soulmate looks like us. Now, this is a very interesting information because basically what we are realizing here, this is the part you need to write down. What we're realizing here is that you cannot identify the soulmate unless you know who you are. And I'm going to elaborate on that in a second. Okay, so first of all, just write this down. Can't see who the soulmate is until you see who you are. If you don't know who you are, or if you haven't become who you are, right, you will never find your soulmate because the soulmate looks like you. Before you can identify the soulmate, you have to know who you are. In other words, before you can find your soulmate, you can write this down. You need to find yourself, right? Let me say that again. Before you can find the soulmate, you need to find yourself, right? You need to have you need to have developed yourself. That's why somebody like Aristophanes would not advise early marriages, right? Because he's saying at that moment, if you marry too young, you don't know who you are. So you don't know if that person is your soulmate because you don't know who you are. And this is why after 20 years, you drift apart because you were not really with someone who was the true reflection of your true self, right? I know a couple like this. It's very sad. I mean, I'm sure we can work it out, but they married very young, 17, 18. And I met the guy recently. It's been, I think, probably 20 years since they married. And he was just telling me, you know, we've drifted apart. I've gone in this direction. I've become this kind of man. And she stayed over here, right? And so there's a rift, right? So the idea here to avoid this, right, is to make sure you have reached your full potential. You have reached a full level of yourself before you even look for the soulmate, right? This is why, by the way, it really, if you're in a period of singleness, right, really work that period, right? This is the moment where you want to build yourself to the highest level so that you can attract the highest level of soulmate, right? The idea here is that like attracts like. If you're on a lower level of yourself, guess who you will attract? A lower level of soulmate, right? This is why, by the way, if you're in a shitty relationship right now, don't blame them, blame yourself. They are only a reflection of you. Right? This is something we often don't realize. If you're with somebody who's a very kind of not great, it's not going well, they're not high quality person, don't look at them. Look at what in you attracted them. Right now, I want to, let me qualify that. Right? So, for example, a lot of us, if you're broken, you will attract somebody broken. Right? This is inevitable. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be as for example, imagine somebody attracts an abusive partner, right? Doesn't mean they're abusive, but it means something broken in them has attracted something broken in the partner, right? It doesn't mean they are broken in the same way. The partner might be broken and be a violent person, and this partner might be broken and be a victim person, right? So, but the idea is, if you are in a difficult relationship where there's a lot of problems, there are chances that you have gone in this relationship before fully becoming yourself, and so you have attracted a lower version of yourself, right? If you're in a bad relationship, look no further than yourself. What in you attracted that person, right? And so the key really, right, is to, of course, then you can always build. I do believe that you can build the soulmate, but definitely, I think it's excellent advice here that the Greeks are giving, right? That Aristophanes is giving. Before you find someone, find yourself. Reach the highest level so that you can attract the highest level of person, right? If you are caught in a cycle where you're going from abusive relationship to abusive relationship, Aristophanes would advise you, stop. Take the time to build yourself. Take a couple years, build yourself so that you can then attract a higher vibration, right, person, or a higher level person. So very important, if you're caught in a cycle of destructive, toxic relationships, chances are you need a bit of time off. You need some time off to build yourself so that you can then attract a different type of person, right? So that's very interesting notion of the soulmate, which I find very helpful and which encourages singleness, right? This is why singleness is a very crucial, important time. This is the moment where you finish yourself so that you can attract somebody who is finished, right? And not some, half version of yourself, right? Something else I wanted to say, but any comment on the soulmate before I continue? Any comment or questions? There's something I want to say. Park, go ahead.
I don't know if this is like related, but I just wanted to ask, like just to like rewrite this, but you know how you're talking about higher love and lower love, right? So higher love is loving an older man, but what did you say about lower love was?
So lower love is loving the woman or a younger boy.
Woman or young, like a woman or younger boy?
Yes, yes.
But there's no difference with like younger woman or older woman for that, like if that makes sense.
No, it's always the same because the woman is always uneducated, whether she's young or old. You see what I mean? It's a question of mind. Her mind is not developed. Even if she's 60 years old, she hasn't gone to school. So her mind is not developed. So it's still going to be a lower love, right? According to Pausanias, right?
Got you.
Okay. Yes. Before I get the other hand, I just wanted to mention, notice the differences here between Aristophanes and the Song of Songs, right? Song of Songs, the person becomes your soulmate through the experience, through the kind of intermingling and the kind of, the polishing of each other against the other, right? There is a evolution towards a soulmate relationship. Whereas here, it's much more on the cautious side, that you want to make sure you are in the right place and that you choose the right person and then you move forward, right? So the Greeks, you can jot this down. I think I mentioned this in the introduction. The Greeks are more cautious than the Hebrews, right? The Greeks want to have it all figured out before they take a step, right? The Hebrews are more inductive. They'll throw themselves in any relationship and make it work, right? And it's possible. I believe that, right? It's funny. I met a guy once. He was married and he was kind of interested in dating me. And I was like, why? So I told him, he was talking to me and it was interesting what he said. He said, I married my wife very young and we have nothing in common. And I feel like with you, we have more conversation and so forth, right? And I kind of pondered what he said, and I wondered, is it not possible, right? To through life develop a soulmate relationship, right? Solomon would say yes. He would say, listen, go back to your wife and see what can you change, what can she change, can you evolve together, right? Can you build something together? So the Hebrews are in a way more creative. They will create the soulmate relationship, whereas the Greeks are much more scientific, right? They want to have it there in front of us, objective, and then we're gonna do it. Right. So both advice are good. I think these are just two different paths which can both lead to the soulmate, in my view. Rudolph, go ahead.
I think you answered many of the things I wanted to say, but there is a universal kind of truth in all this. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I view many of these philosophies or truths or ideologies as being multicultural, very universal, very global, timeless. Because look, we're talking about a period of time in society where Greece may have been developed more so than certain areas in Europe or other areas of the world. Nonetheless, we're 2000 plus years later, and we're using these philosophies to kind of create our own conclusions from it and draw our own wisdom from it. And is it wrong to say that what was once developed during these conversations in symposia or wherever these guys met, that they really discovered something that had great enormity, that had incredible gravitas, that reaches into our times today? Or should we not always try to apply those philosophies?
Yeah, I mean, me, of course, I'm teaching them. So I think we should, right? There's always timeless wisdom, right? Even if there's some, cultural things that we don't agree with, there's still the timeless wisdom, right, in the philosophies. And in fact, many of the culture in Queens, I think from what I noticed from what you're telling me about your families and stuff, there is an emphasis on what Aristophanes is saying, right? Find someone who has your own religion, find someone who has your own ethnicity, find someone who has your own social status, right? Find someone who has the same intellectual. This is the same advice that Aristophanes is saying, right? Find someone who is from your background. Then you will have a better, right? So of course, Solomon would disagree. He did the opposite, right? But there's a wisdom in both, right? And you have in a way to pick which path you're going to take, right? Am I going to take the path of Solomon, the path of Aristophanes? But both are gems, right? You have to decide. But there's a lot of wisdom, right? In building yourself and finding someone who is like-minded, who shares a lot of, common things. But Solomon, of course, would say, nah, just pick someone completely different and see what happens. Right? So these are the two options. Donaldson, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just bouncing off of Mr. Rudolph, it's almost like it almost like frightens me to hear some of the theories because they sound so like good. They sound true. And I have to kind of sit here and remind myself that there's like a few different perspectives, and like I think it like makes me less frightened to hear like that the Hebrews and the Greeks kind of like think differently, and that there might be more than one way to be successful in love.
Absolutely. That is definitely my take on it, right? There is more than one way to be successful in love. There are different paths, right? There's not just one path, like we tend to be taught that. Okay, let's go now to Agathon. He's the last one, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go to Diotima. So Agathon, if you recall, he is not one of these older guys. He is actually one of the teenagers, but he seems to be pretty wealthy, pretty sophisticated, because the party's taking place in his house, right? So he's kind of the star of the show, right? He's probably 17, 18 years old. And, out of courtesy, they invite him to speak. And he makes the terrible mistake to accept, right? Because we are going to see as we enter this, as we read what he has to say, how he just goes into blunder after blunder. I mean, he just destroys himself in this speech. And we're going to look at how. So let's begin. Let's take a look at Agathon. He's on page 29. Okay, so and in fact, he does such a poor job, and it gets even worse because afterwards Socrates comes over and he's like, Agathon, can I ask you a few questions? And we know when Socrates is doing that, we know to run away. This is not, you don't want to be roasted by Socrates in front of him. That's basically what he does. He roasts him, but that's for the second hour. But for now, let's see what he did that brought this Socratic roast upon himself. So I'm on page 29, the top of the page, I claim. Who is with me? Wave at me if you're there. I claim. Okay, great. Okay, so he begins, I claim. Already there, we know it's not going to go well, right? Why? Because you're 17. And why are you claiming anything, right? Who are you to claim, right? What do you know? Nothing. right? What you could say, I think, I maybe, you know, but I claim, like, you know, he's just proof, right? That you can sense here the flamboyance, right? Of Agathon is very confident, a little overconfident, and is going to destroy him. So he considers, I claim. Now watch what he does, and watch how he, in a way, destroys himself, right? And I'm going to ask you how. So he begins there. I claim, though all the gods are happy, love, if it is proper to say this and does not cause offense, is the happiest. Okay, that's fine. Then he continues, gets worse, because he's the most beautiful and best. Okay, continuing. He's the most beautiful for this reason. He just gets worse and worse. First of all, Phaedrus, he is the youngest of gods. Okay, so we're in shaky territory, right? He continues. He himself provides good evidence. Love naturally, he continues, love naturally hates old age and keeps his distance from it. He always associates with the young and is one of them, right? Because of course, he loves what is the most beautiful and best. Okay, you heard a few lines. Already you should be able to categorize Agathon. Let me ask it this way. Where is Agathon? In the cave or outside of the cave? What do you think? And what shows you, what arguments can you give me for his positioning? Is he in the cave or outside of the cave? Donaldson, go ahead.
He's in the cave, man. He's attracted to the physical and not so much the intellectual.
Okay, yeah, he makes two huge mistakes. Oh, there's 3 participants. Okay, Bhattacharjee, go ahead. Let's hear all of you.
I agree. He is in the cave because he assumes that just because you're older, somehow that makes you less beautiful. So it's very shallow, his way of thinking.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Noble, what do you want to ask? Say, what do you want to say, Noble?
I was going to say that he's definitely in the cave. And to your question that you were going to ask, what was one of his mistakes? Can I answer it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So he's in a room full of older men, and he's going to say that naturally love hates older men. Like, you're not sitting with 6 other.
I mean, just basic, what is it? Courtesy, right? I mean, the minimum is to not say that. You can be stupid, but you don't have to be mean, right? So he's both. He's both. So exactly. First of all, he's offensive to all the men who are there, right? And second of all, he's deep. He shows, right? He displays his ignorance, right? He plasters his ignorance, right? And everybody at that moment realizes, wow, this guy's still in the cave, right? He's still thinking that love is about physical beauty, right? And we've just, I mean, has he listened to anything? I mean, everybody, they've been saying something else, right? The opposite. So, but now let's look a little bit, what is Agathon truly saying, right? Because there is something going on there. There's something in his psyche, right? That I want to analyze, because in a way, I'm going to show you, all of us are a little bit like Agathon, right? So let me just say it, and then Souvenance, I'll get you, right? So what we're noticing here with Agathon is that actually what he's describing is, when he's describing youth and beauty and so forth, and saying love is beautiful, love is youthful, he's basically describing himself, right? And his message really is, in this context, he's saying, if you want to find love, love me. Because I am the embodiment of the goddess of love, right? I am youthful, I am beautiful, right? So in a way, what Agathon is saying through all of these, stumbling words, right, is what the message that we're getting, right, is that if you want to find love, love me. Agathon is really, for him, love is about being loved, right? Let me say that again, because that's the main idea here, right? There is an idea, right, in Agathon. To love is to be loved. That's for him what love is. And all of us, to a certain degree, we see love like that, right? We see love as, why do I fall in love? Why do I want to find a partner? So that I am loved, right? So in a way, we're very much, all of us have a little bit of Agathon inside of us. Souvenance, tell us. Souvenance?
I was just going to add also that with that being said, I feel like he also makes it seem like when you're old, love is like too late or it's like dead for them.
Wait, say that again, because there was an airplane and the vacuum cleaner.
It's okay. I was saying how, with all that being said, he makes it seem like when you're old, love is like dying or it's like dead for them already. And like when you're youthful, I think like love is more alive.
Exactly, right? Absolutely. Saying love is for the young. That's what he's saying. And by the way, our society believes this. Look at every single movie and the percentage of movies on young love and percentage of movies on mature love. I mean, we believe the songs, percentage of songs on young love, percentage of songs on mature love. Actually, there are no songs on mature love. I haven't seen one for a while, right? It's all about being youthful and sexy and hot and whatever. And then you find love. But if you're not that, forget it. Just, the hell with you. So this is, Agathon is very much a reflection even of our time, of our civilization, of our perspective on love. But again, I think I love what Rudolph said last time, right? There is a component of love, which is for the young, the kind of, what we saw in the Song of Songs, right? This kind of, the playfulness, the beginning, the young love and so forth. But there is also a way that love transmutes into something more profound, right? And this we never hear about, right? The way that love transforms into the way that Rudolph talked about it last time, trust, mutual trust, acceptance, right? Where it deepens into those levels is never spoken of, right? We really live in an agathon society, right? Noble, speak to us.
When you said that we don't really consider older people having the chance to love or like having the ability to like be in a new relationship, it reminded me of when my friend told me that her grandfather had a girlfriend, and like I was taken aback at first, but then I started to think, and I was like, why did my first initial reaction think, oh, isn't he too old to have a girlfriend? And I'm just like, older people still have the desire to love and the desire to be loved. So
exactly, because we identify a romantic love with sex, right? But it's much more than that, right? This is only one of the components. So of course, then they can have a romantic love, right? There's a whole lot more going on, right? So absolutely. Okay, good. Now, here's my question. Oh, I see a couple more hands. Bhattacharjee, is that old hand or?
Hello.
People keep on calling me.
Let me know if you guys can hear me. I don't know if these work or not.
We got you. Go ahead.
Okay. I when I actually read that part, I kind of thought of it how like even culturally we like I'm South Asian and I see that happening a lot with women, especially where let's say if you're a divorcee, and like after a certain age, you're kind of seen as like, oh, you've already lived your life. There's no chance for you to find love. So it's very reflective of like culture, like especially like deep rooted like misogynistic ideas that we still kind of hold to this day.
Nicely put. Yes, that's a very nice application of agathon. Absolutely, right? We need to reformulate, and I think because we don't have a sense of the other levels of love, we can't imagine older people, right, having love again, and we are only seeing love as just infatuation, right? So that's the idea here. Rudolph, go ahead.
But allow me to ask if it would be wrong of me to think that when you are young, should you, in addition to growing intellectually and discovering your capacity, should you not also try to discover the basics of love and jump around and try out relationships? Should you not use that time? Not that I'm speaking for Agathon, and he was very promiscuous in many other areas, but should the late teens, the early 20s not be a time where you just kick the tires, so to say, and say, try this guy or this gal, looks good, after a week, maybe the interest wanes and you move on, but it gives you an experience, something to look back on that you can use as a basis to build upon. So I always thought that I don't want to poo-poo the growing pains of a person, be it a man or a woman, and don't look down on mistakes that are made during that time. Is that wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you put it, because you're basically saying that our mistakes are part of our journey, right? They're part of our growth. They're part of our love journey. And you cannot actually move forward without the mistakes. You don't grow without the mistakes, right? Where I would add a nuance to what you said, we are told, right, we need to experience multiple partners to know who we are. I tend to think that there's another path also. So yes, that works. I'm sure that is excellent. Also a good path, but there's another path where with one partner, you can also experience different moments, different seasons, different aspects of them as they are changing, as they are taking turns and twists, right? So I think the experience, I know we always talk about gaining experience. I think the experience can be gained either with multiple partners, but also with a single partner, you can really gain a lot of experience also, because the person is constantly changing, right? The life is changing, the seasons are changing. And so you are at each time you are confronted with a version of yourself that you have to expand or broaden or transform, right? So I'm going to add that to what you have to say. Okay, excellent discussion. Let's take a 2 minutes. Okay, let's do 2 minutes. And then we'll go to, so just the time, bathroom break, come back. And then we're going to go and look at Diotima. So let's do that now. I'm going to, what am I going to do? Pause the recording. So I'll see you exactly at 4:15. 4:15. Should I stop the recording or pause it? I'm just going to pause it. Okay, so now we go to our last speaker, which is Diotima. So, and this is going to mark a turning point. But before we go to her, I forgot to ask you this crucial, important question, which is actually very much related to the test question. So I need to make that point very clear. We talked about the 3 speakers, right? And they all have kind of very different perspectives, right? They sound very different, but at the same time, there is something that unites them. And so this is kind of a riddle I'm giving you. Can anyone tell me what is it that they all have in common? What unites them? What is missing in all 3 of them, right? All 3 of them are missing something fundamental when they're talking about love. They have kind of a terrible blind spot. Can anybody see it? Let's see if you can figure this out. Can anybody see the blind spot in all 3 philosophers? They have the same blind spot. I'm going to wait a little bit because I want you guys to find it. Olarte, you're first. Go ahead.
I don't know. Is it possible that they are all single?
That's interesting. That's interesting. I think that plays a part. Yeah, that plays a part. I think you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Who else wants to try? And find so there's something missing, yes. And you're on the right track, Olarte. Donaldson, go ahead.
Is it that they're all men?
So yes, they're all men. That's true too. But what are these 3 men missing? Because you can be a man. Socrates is a man, right? But he's not going to sound like them, right? He's going to be channeling Diotima. So what do they have in common that they're missing? What's their blind spot? Who else can find it? Think of them in connection to Solomon's work. You will see very clearly the contrast when you compare them to the Song of Songs, to what they're saying, to what the Song of Songs is saying. If you see them side by side, you're going to see it. Nobo, go ahead.
Are we missing the part where they give love?
Yes, excellent. Yes, I'm gonna add to that. But anybody else wants to add before? You're on point. Anybody else want to add before? She's on the track. Anybody want to add anything on that track? Right, that was excellent observation, Noble. Anybody else want to try to beat that? Okay. Yes. So this is what I noticed. 2 things I noticed as I was reading this text. Right. Number 1. It's all really, the love is really all about what the self can get and never about what the self can give, right? This is all about, let me as a self make sure I get what I need. So, and look at them. So make sure you write this down, right? What unites all 3 of them is the hyper focus on the self. the other does not exist. The other in this text is absent. There's no concern in these texts about what about the other? What about my responsibilities to the other? What about what I can offer the other? It's all about what can the other offer me? And how can I make sure that I get what I need, right? So let me go down the list. Posanias, you're looking for higher love. I'm going to make sure I find a partner who will give me higher love, who will therefore inspire me, who will elevate me, inspire me, right? So you're seeking a partner for yourself, right? So if you're a young man seeking an older man, you're seeking to rise in society, you're not seeking the older man, right? And if you're an older man seeking the younger man, you're seeking just sexual favor. You don't care who, as long as they're good at it, right? So in general, in Posanias, even though you're seeking a love to elevate you, it's still about you, right? There's nothing there about how can you, what, now here's a question I would ask Posanias. What happens when your beloved starts to pull you down? Does that mean they're not the one, right? Does that mean you just dump them? Like, oh, you're pulling me down, right? You're dragging me down. You're slowing me down, right? These are moments. This will happen, right? You will be in relationships where initially was good, and then there will be moments where your beloved will pull you down. They will be maybe depressed or lost a job or go through a crisis, and now they're pulling you down. Suppose what do we do now? Right? If they're not elevating me anymore, does that mean I can just discard them? So there's something missing here. It's all about what the other can do for me. But what about what I can do for the other? Look at Aristophanes. The other is inexistent because the beloved has to be like me, right? So if the beloved is different, has different other values or other way of seeing, or is radically different from me in their perspective, in their rhythm, in their intelligence, in their social status, then it's not my soulmate. Right? Problem, right? Solomon immediately spotted that one, right? Solomon is like, no, I'm gonna go with someone the opposite. Right? So with Aristophanes, what happens when you're dating someone you think is your soulmate and all of a sudden you realize they're a Trump supporter? Or you realize they voted for Biden, right? Or you realize they're socialist, or they're feminist, or they're, or so all of a sudden you realize that there is some irreconcilable difference between you. Does that mean it's not your soulmate, right? That's the problem with Aristophanes, right? There's no room here for otherness, right? And finally, Agathon, what happens when your beloved stops loving you for a while, for a season? Because it will happen, right? It will happen. In every relationship, there are seasons where the love dies, right? We're going to talk about what to do then, right? But it will happen. So what happens now? They're not loving me. I'm not getting the love I want. I'm not happy. Does that mean it's over? Right? So I hope you're seeing, right, how ultimately, make sure you write this down and then I'll get you Suleimanov, right? Make sure you see that ultimately the three speeches are united in a concern for the self. The self is at the center and the other is inexistent, in essence, right? There's nothing there about what are the self's responsibilities to the other. Is there even an other that, that I could date, right? Okay, Suleimanov, go ahead.
Yeah, so that actually reminded me when I was reading, I think it was Pausanias. Is that how you say her name?
Pausanias.
Yeah, Pausanias. I remember her speech. She
Him.
was saying,
Him.
oh, that was a him. Oh, whoops. I probably wrote that wrong. Well, when I was reading his speech, I remember he constantly kept saying, he said a specific line about testing your partner.
Yes.
I assumed he had a lot of trust issues, and no, I'm serious. I was like, I was writing that down, and I was assuming like that because he was very like, he kept saying like how you constantly have to keep testing your partner because you never know like what their hidden intentions can be, and I just assumed that he had a very bad experience in his past, and that kind of just reminded me. I wanted to bring that up.
Yes, no, that's a good point. Absolutely, right? You
Because
have
I wrote in my reading assignment that like if you don't have trust, like you don't have really a lot with in a relationship, and he clearly had no trust. He showed no trust whatsoever. He kept bringing up like if the man would constantly keep like doing wrong to his partner, and then I was like,
very good. Yes, I love the way you bring it up and talk about trust, because ultimately this is the problem. There's no room in these guys' discourse for betrayal. right? But betrayal is an inherent part of relationship. There will always be that moment of betrayal, and how you navigate the betrayal is going to measure the depth of your love, right? Or the strength of your love, or is going to create, right, that strength. So there's no room for betrayal. And that's the problem, right? The partner has to be just perfect. And then I take him, right, in his perfection. So yes, excellent. And contrast also with Song of Songs, where you have this gradual building of trust, right? Excellent. Okay, so now Diotima, we're going to see a shift. And we know this, we know there's going to be a shift for two reasons. Number one, we're dealing with a woman. So already we know, okay, we're changing gears, right? We were dealing with a more male-centered approach, and now we're shifting to another gender, to another perspective. We should expect, right, something new to happen. Now there's something else. Diotima also is not Greek, right? So she's gonna offer, she's somebody that Socrates met outside, right? And he is now channeling her wisdom, right? So we know with Diotima that there's going to be a shift. And what I want to show is that with Diotima, you have a movement back to what we learned in the Song of Songs, right? And make sure you write this down, because this is the fundamental difference between Diotima and the three speeches, is that for Diotima, the other becomes back center stage, right? The other is, the love is at, the emphasis is shifted. In the three speeches, the self is the center. For Diotima, the other is the center, right? And she defines love in that way when she says love is a desire, right? If you recall, Socrates is interrogating Agathon, destroying him bit by bit, deconstructing him in front of everyone, roasting him, as we say, right? And then he gets to this definition. What is desire? Anybody can tell me the definition of desire? See if you remember. If you don't, it's okay, I'll just tell you. I'm curious if anyone remembers it. Anybody remember the definition of desire that Socrates gives as he begins to talk about Diotima? Okay, desire is interesting. Desire is very different from need. I want to emphasize that. Make sure you write this down. Desire is not the same thing as needing. When you need something, you want something for yourself. So the movement is going from the outside towards yourself. I need water. I need food. I need company. I need love, right? This is a movement going from the other to the self. Desire is exactly the opposite movement. It's going from the self to the other. The other attracts me. I am curious about the other. I am intrigued about the other. The other inspires me. The other challenges me. The other moves me beyond myself. That's desire. Desire is for something you do not have and something you are not. Okay, let me say that again, right? Her definition of desire is you always desire that which you do not have. You always desire that which you are not, right? So it's a movement away from the self towards what it isn't. It's not a movement towards the self. I need this, I need that, I need this. It's a movement where I am intrigued, I am inspired, I am challenged, I am moved, I am perplexed, I am attracted, I am seduced by the other, right? So very different, right, from need. And so I want to go now and talk a little bit about Diotima. And I want to make first one observation, which I thought was very troubling as I was reading the text. So I'm going to give you right now just a brief, I do this very rarely, but I'm going to do it here because it's needed. I'm going to give a feminist critique of Diotima's discourse as spoken by Socrates. I want you to notice this. Socrates is speaking, right? He's channeling Diotima, and we begin by hearing about Diotima's definition of love as desire and pregnancy, right? She mentions these two things, desire, pregnancy. Let me write them in the chat because those are the two main components that she talks about. And notice how both desire and pregnancy are physical experiences. Already we have a shift, right? Back into the physical, right? We're back in the material physical realm, but not in a low way, right? This is very different. In Diotima, you have a celebration of the physical, right? Of the material aspect of love. And she talks about physical desire, and then of course, the very physical corporeal experience of pregnancy. So she begins talking about love starting from her own body, right? Notice this, that she is speaking as a feminine body, as a woman, right? She's speaking from her experience as an embodied human being, right? And so we are expecting, at least I was, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to hear about, a very feminine perspective, a very embodied perspective. And so I'm like, okay, love as desire, love as pregnancy. It's interesting to go into the female experience, female embodied experience of love. And then all of a sudden, I see that it's taking a very strange turn, and it becomes more and more abstract until ultimately for Socrates ends by saying, ultimately the highest love is the love of wisdom. And so we move, right? We love people, we love, and then we move from people to ideas, and from ideas to wisdom. And ultimately the highest love is not of a person, it's of wisdom. Do you see how the discourse becomes more and more abstract and more abstracted from her body? Are you let me get the gallery so I can see if I can see you wave at me. Are you seeing this? Wave at me if you're catching what I'm saying. Sort of. Okay. Yes. So we have really, so basically what you can write, right, which is what I was observing, is that she starts from her experience as a woman, and then it's like Socrates hijacks her discourse and goes into his own direction, which is of course highly abstract, highly Platonic, right? Like Rudolph mentioned, and the female body is kind of discarded along the way. We don't hear about it anymore. Okay, so you can write this down, right? That there's here, in my view, a hijacking of Diotima's discourse, which starts out from her very feminine embodied experience, and then slowly Socrates takes over and discards the feminine body that is speaking and just gets into this kind of abstract definition of the love. Highest love is the love of wisdom. People don't matter, right? Okay, so what I want to do with us today in class, I want to go back and I want to salvage Diotima. I want to save and redeem Diotima. And so what I want to do is together, I want us to discuss and look at these two things she said. Love is a desire and love is a pregnancy, right? Love has a structure of desire and love has a structure of a pregnancy. And I want us to really ponder these two metaphors, right? And I want you to tell me, what is she saying? What is she saying about love when she says love is a desire? And then we'll go into the pregnancy aspect. Okay, so let's start with desire. What does it mean when Diotima is saying love is a movement outside of yourself? Give me some examples of ways you have experienced love in that way, right? We tend to think love is a homecoming, right? Diotima says, no, love is an exile, right? If you think of love as a homecoming, you're going to miss it. True love is an exile beyond yourself. Okay, so what does it mean? Has any one of you felt exiled in your love relationships? And how was that, in a way, a powerful experience, right? Let me hear a little bit about what does it mean when she says love is an exile? That's my first question. So let me hear you guys a little bit on that. So I'm gonna really rely on you guys for the last part of class, because I want us to together, I want us to rebuild or recreate what Diotima would have said if she had been allowed to speak. So I want to kind of go back and give her a voice. So let me hear. So I'm going to rely on you. What do you guys, let's open up the floor for different interpretations of this idea of love as an exile. What does it mean? How is it a good thing? And so forth. I'm looking at the gallery. Nobody has ever experienced love as an exile, as a movement outside of yourself? And how would you describe the Song of Songs? Is that a homecoming or is that an exile? You can talk about that too if you want. Donaldson.
I'm not sure if I'm like interpreting this entirely correctly, but I think I'm thinking of the Song of Songs and kind of that like honeymoon stage of the relationship. I think a lot of focus is on the other person, and you're doing your best to kind of present the best version of yourself, and you might act a little differently than you normally would if it was just kind of you with your friends, let's say. So And you could call it growth, you can call it making a change, but I could see like that to me, I think, in like an experience I've had is, you start dating someone and you kind of like forget about your friends and you forget about like all your interests, and all of a sudden, your primary focus is this person.
Excellent, right? The best example of what she's talking about is the Song of Songs, right? They are losing themselves, right? At first in each other. The woman is focused entirely on the man, right? Eventually she recovers herself, right? But there's definitely a focus on the other in the Song of Songs that we don't have, right? In the three speeches. So definitely this woman is torn from herself, right? She is in a way, and both of them, right, move beyond themselves in the relationship, right? The woman is forced to release the man, right? This is a movement away from the self. The man becomes hyper-focused on the woman, right? He's able to deeply desire her. Again, a movement away from the self. So the movement in the Song of Songs is what Diotima is describing. It is a movement of growth, of blossoming, of expansion, of transcendence towards the other, right? So yes, absolutely, that's a good example. Anybody else want to add anything on love as an exile? So I want to add a little bit. To understand love like that, we need to see the implications so we can then better navigate our relationships. Love as an exile means that love is not going to be a homecoming. In other words, there will be moments when you're out of your comfort zone. There will be moments when you're fighting. There will be moments when the other person will challenge you. Love as an exile means that conflict is an inherent part of love, right? And so what Diotima is saying, that in a way, this conflict is good, right? Because it's moving you beyond yourself. This anytime you have a conflict in a relationship or a friction, right? It's an opportunity for growth, always, right? Always use your conflicts to grow, right? And so in a way, what she's saying is that misunderstandings, conflict, challenges are inherent to love, and we have to embrace that as part of love. As I know couples, they date and then they have a first fight, and now they're questioning why they're dating. Right? Well, the first fight is actually finally now you on the track, right? To love beyond yourself, right? To love as desire. So in a way, Diotima would say we should celebrate our conflicts. We should celebrate our differences, the challenges we go through, because these are all ways that we can expand ourselves, right? Bhattacharjee, go ahead.
So for that, I was kind of thinking of like familial love, where like, there's a certain phase where it's like, even as a kid, you might not get along with your parent. They may have like the best interest in heart, but they put themselves out there to make sure that you feel protected and you feel loved, even though you might be absolutely cruel to them. So I was kind of thinking of that. It's like, because they have a desire towards you, they're going to look up for your best interest, even though it may hurt them, like at the time that you're, saying or being rude to them.
Yeah, absolutely. This class obviously applies wonderfully to family relationships and so forth, right? We're focusing on romantic love, but absolutely, right? The child is often a challenge to the parent. And by the way, of course, the parent is a challenge to the child, but the child also is a challenge to the parent. And very often as parents, we don't realize that these challenges are there for us to grow, right? We tend to always want the child to grow, but we can also grow from the challenge that the child is presenting us, right? This is often, it goes both ways, right? So this is definitely right. Any relationship will tear you beyond yourself. And if you allow it to do it, that's the very definition of growth, right? Rudolph, go ahead.
Two things. When you were talking about the critique on Diotima and Socrates from a womanist point of view, I wanted to throw in that I have often attempted, and I'm a fierce champion of women, period, more in society and areas that are unfortunately still not highlighted enough. And what I see in this part of the work is that the woman, unfortunately, is very unconsciously, but very directly relegated to a lower rank also. it doesn't even come to his mind to even consider her as being worthy to be mentioned in this. And it's a reflection of the times. I mean, it's a very paternistic kind of environment we're in, and I have great criticism of the ancient Greeks. Nonetheless, it's I appreciate that he wanders on to the higher spiritual love, but he completely leaves out again that love can only exist between two people.
Exactly.
Now, granted, there may be the homosexual element within the ancient society at the time, so there may be some really twisted kind of thinking going on in our modern view, twisted. On the other hand, it really is astounding that despite the inability to reach to the female human being in a philosophical way, and look how long it took for this to actually happen. 2,500 years, 2,400 years later,
Yes.
we're still struggling with it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that, and then you went on to say that their conflict is always good in a relationship, and I think it was Peter who earlier said, or I'm not sure. Nonetheless, somebody said it earlier, that you're being made part of the growing couple when you work together, when you work out your differences, when you solve challenges. Jesse actually said it earlier in other context. And my view of this is also that not only can you work things out together, but a conflict will also give you time to distance yourself from the action and say, let me take a step back and portray self-discipline and humility and say, let me look at what I could have done differently to avoid this situation altogether. Now we're at the position where we now need to solve a problem or an issue, or we're faced with a challenge. But next time around, how can I look at this challenge, draw conclusions from it, and next time something smells like this challenge in our relationship, maybe I'll just take a step back and reflect upon my own actions, my own thoughts, and come up with a solution that may be not necessarily putting me into the right, but it will solve the solution, and it will be for the greater good of the relationship rather than solving a problem.
Good.
My wisdom of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Yes. The conflict, the art of conflict, right? There is a whole artfulness that we need to develop when it comes to conflict, so we can actually grow from it rather than, become destroyed by it, right? Now, for the next part, I'm gonna I have to take away my camera because I have to charge my computer. So they're in the same outlet. So you're gonna see just my smiling face for the last 15 minutes. That's okay. You can hear me, right? Yes. Okay, so let's go into love as a pregnancy. I feel weird now, not being a real picture. Anyways, let's move to love as a pregnancy. So let's look at it this way, right? Of course, love brings forth pregnancy, right? For Diotima in many ways, intellectually or spiritually or physically. But I want to look at pregnancy as a metaphor for love, as a metaphor to what happens to us when we love, right? So I'm curious what you guys could say. Well, let's first look at pregnancy, right? In fact, let me ask you, how many of you have been or have been close to someone who is pregnant? So let's see the experiences. You put your hand in the screen. Okay, 1, 2, that's it? Okay, 3, okay. So you have some experience. Okay, now you guys will help us because the rest of us are going to listen to you. So pregnancy, pleasant experience or crazy experience? How would you describe it? Let's hear some descriptions. Those of you, the 4 of you who raised your hands. Olarte, go ahead.
Not a pleasant experience.
Explain, tell us what happened, Olarte.
Well, the first 3 or 4 months of my first pregnancy, I was just really sad. I was nauseous all the time. I couldn't eat. I lost weight. I was exhausted. I couldn't fit in my clothes. So, that was very discouraging.
Okay, excellent. Very good description. Very accurate. Some of us, we think, oh, pregnancy, you glow with happiness because no, not the first
Not
few
for
months.
me. No.
No glow. Where is that glow? Just Beyonce glows when she's pregnant. That's it. The rest of us, Donaldson, tell us, what do you know about it?
So my cousin is pregnant right now, and she's like telling me about how like just like any like food smell or like random food smells will just like make her nauseous, and that seems awful, and she seems pretty uncomfortable about her body. And I think what kind of frightened me the most was her experiences sort of like with the doctor, and how they're just like always kind of like checking like developmental stages, like the stages of pregnancy, and there's just so much that can go wrong, and they're telling you like the percentages and chances of like what could happen.
Okay.
And I think that's like very anxiety producing and frightening to go through.
Excellent. Good observation. Good knowledge. First hand, second hand knowledge. Rudolph, tell us.
So not only am I an old dog, but I'm also a grandpa. So I've seen it both in my life and in one of my daughter's lives that babies were born. And when it was in my life, I was completely unprepared to be a father and completely unprepared to support my wife with all that Oyarte described. And it happens to most and many women, and it's a drastic change of the physiology. And we guys don't seem to be wired to have the ability to even begin to understand how big of a change it is, how much mental change goes along with the physical change, how painful everything is to create a baby, because we have 5 minutes of involvement in the whole thing.
Excellent. Okay, so now, we got an excellent description of everything. So now I want you to apply this to love. How is love in a way like bearing a child? Tell me a little bit, what comes up in your mind when you think of being in love as being pregnant? Suleymanov, go ahead.
Well, if you think about it in the ideal perspective, I mean, when you have a baby, of course you have to sacrifice, like a lot to take care of the child. And the same thing comes, I guess, if you love someone. If you like really love someone, I think you have to be willing to put aside your ego. You have to be willing to put aside your pride, and to take initiative. It kind of comes into kind of pair.
Excellent. Beautifully said. I love the way you put it. Absolutely. The pregnancy, the woman loses so much, right? If you've been pregnant, you know that your whole life is gone. It's like your life is sucked just away from you into that other life. And you tend to sometimes forget that you lose so much, but at the end you gain so much too, right? And so often in love, we are so afraid of losing that little bit of independence, that little bit of private, that little bit of I like doing that, and that little, or we lose other options and so forth. And it's a big sacrifice, right? Love implies sacrifice. It implies loss, right? But if we're willing to lose some of these things, lose some of our agency, lose some of our independence, lose the other options, right? We will gain so much more at the end of that process, right? So very nicely put, Suleymanov, when you describe love as sacrifice. We'll talk a lot about that in this class. Very important concept. Sacrifice in the sense of losing in order to gain so much more, right? Anybody else? Suvanos, go ahead.
A question about pregnancy and this topic. Could you sometimes also say like being pregnant, like love pregnant, could also like, some people hide that they're pregnant. Like, wouldn't that also be something to think about, like hiding your love, if that makes sense?
Yes, and why
Because
do
like
you go deeper into why they would hide their pregnancy? I'm curious. What is the motive here?
I'm just like thinking of my own experience with pregnancy. Like my mom, when she was having my sister, like I was really excited to like let the whole world know I'm having a sister, but like she always wanted me to like be quiet.
Yes,
It's
yes,
like
yes. This
bad
is
energies and stuff.
yeah, the fear of losing the child, right? So you don't want to proclaim it too loudly until it's born, because like I think it's who was it who was going through the Donaldson, was that you? All the tests, right, that the cousin is having, and the fear of losing the child. So often women actually don't want to talk about it until the baby's actually born and looks normal, because they're afraid, right? So, and by the way, it applies to us in love, right? Many of us are afraid to make it official, are afraid to commit because we are afraid of losing that person. And it's paradox, because by being afraid to commit, you lose the person, right? So we're afraid to, our fear, becomes the reason why we lose the person, right? So fear, yes, definitely. You mentioned very nicely the fear element in pregnancy, which is also in relationships. And so you want to hide, you don't want to commit, you don't want to proclaim it, you want it to be secretive, because deep down you're afraid of the loss, that it might not work out and then you look stupid, and you become a public tragedy, right? So that's a good, excellent connection. I like it. Anybody else want to riff on love as pregnancy? Let's see, what do I have? I have a few things too. Yeah, I'll contribute while you guys are thinking, right? I love the way that pregnancy is an expansion of oneself, right? You become, as a woman, you become larger than life, no pun intended, right? So you really expand, and there's this being that becomes a part of you. And in many ways, right, we tend to forget that love, it is kind of like that. We will expand. It's an expansion of the self. And so I tell my student, I had a student come to me last night about a breakup. She was, we were talking about it. And she said, I feel like he took so much from me. She said, I feel like he took so much from me, and I feel like he owes me. And I said, listen, what did he take from you? Look what you have become, right? Look how beautiful you have become, how much you have loved, how this has made you into the woman that you are, right? You've not lost, he's lost. If anybody lost anything, it's him. You gained, you expanded, you blossomed, you became a woman, you became a lover, right? So this is why I really believe very firmly that when one loves, one never loses, one gains. Even the partner goes away, you have gained yourself, you have gained this deep ability to love, you have gained this expansion of the self. So that's one thing that I think about when I think of love as pregnancy. Anybody else in the last 7 minutes we have wants to add to love as pregnancy? By the way, notice the pain element, right? The pain which enables a birth, right? Likewise, we sometimes, so here's another thought, right? We tend to want to avoid the pain in our relationships, not knowing that the pain is a birth process. The pain ushers in new life. And very often in our relationships, when we go through pain, it marks very often the beginning of a next stage, of a next level, of a new beginning. And too often we miss it because we break up during the pain. We don't go through the pain, we don't go through the crisis, and we miss the birth, right, of who we could be as a couple. Good. Last thoughts, last questions before we conclude. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about your test, about the essay, about what's due on Tuesday. So next week, we have class only twice a week, right? From next week on, so Tuesday and Thursday. So that gives you a little more time to listen to the videos, do the work, and so forth. So the test. So the test is, you have 2 questions in the syllabus. You answer both. And you want to write, for each question, you want to write 1 page, single-spaced. And the key to getting a good grade on the test is basically how good your notes are, because basically the answers is your notes, right? I mean, don't give me all your notes, but really try to get the most possible of what you wrote down into your answer. So the test is really just for me to see how well you're taking notes. It's not, you don't need to think, you don't need to be smart, you don't need to say anything intelligent, just the notes, right? You can be intelligent in the reading assignments, in the essay, but in the test, I want you to be a little stupid, right? Just give me the notes, right? Make sure you have the detailed notes. And the other component is make sure you quote. So anything you say about Solomon or Plato, you want to have quotes from the text that we read. And usually it's nothing more than the quotes that I mentioned in class, right? You don't need to have extra quotes. You can, but you don't have to. Okay, so that test is due Saturday night. Or, you know, I mean, I'll grade them Sunday. So if you're really cramming, it's not like I'm going to wake up at 6 on Sunday to look at your test, right? So you also have part of Sunday morning if you really need it. Any problems in the class with the Saturday as a day of rest? I think we have a number of Jews in the class. Is anybody worried about the deadline on Saturday night? Is that going to be a problem for any of you? Because obviously you can hand it in Friday, or you can hand it in Saturday night or Sunday morning. So technically that day should be okay. But Suleimanov, go ahead.
Worst case scenario, because I am Jewish, can I just like on Sunday morning around just in case?
Exactly.
Like just in case.
So
Yeah.
if you're Jewish, or if you're a procrastinator, right? You have, Sunday morning, because I'm gonna look at them, around noon.
I think I'll have it in before, but just in case, if I can get the Sunday, like just Sunday morning.
Cool. Yes, I'm gonna allow that, of course, so that, because I don't want to and it's not like I'm gonna be looking at them at 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. That's not going to happen. So, so you do have Sunday morning to work on it, but they should be in by the time I look at them, which is 11, 12, something like that. Okay, so that's the test. Any questions about the test? And you put it, of course, in the drive, in the folder of the test. Now the essay, that's the fun part. This is 1.5 pages, single spaced. And I want you to start with a love crisis. It can be a crisis you've been through or are going through, or it can be a crisis that people around you are going through. I want you to tell me about the crisis, tell me what's going on. And then I want you to bring some of the wisdom of what we talked about in class. Could be anything you pick. It could be just Solomon, just Plato, or both. And try to find ways to resolve the crisis or to untangle the problem, right? You want to kind of address the crisis, bring some words of wisdom to the crisis. And you can write it in any style. You can write it like a journal. You can write it like a letter to yourself or a letter to your lover, a letter to those people, whatever, it doesn't matter. Very freestyle, but I want a crisis and I want some wisdom. Those are the two things that will give you the full credit on that. So any questions on the essay, which is due the same time as the test. And you put it in the folder of the essay.
Pages for the essay?
Yeah. What?
How many pages for the essay?
1.5, single spaced. 1.5.
Oh, okay.
Pages. And please do not give me a massive title page where you take up the first half of the first page, right? I just want your name. That's it. Boom. And nothing else, right? You really want to start writing at the top of the page. So I have a full 1.5 pages. Okay. Tuesday, we are starting roomies. So of course you will watch the video on the recorded lectures. So you go to Blackboard, you go to the left-hand tab, whatever, you go to the recorded lecture on Rumi, you listen to that, you do the audio question. Then you read, it's only 4 poems, but you should try to read more. It's very nice, but I'm going to focus on only those 4 poems. So you can really delve into those and do the reading assignment on those, right? Really try to meditate on those 4 poems and give me something interesting. So that's it for next time. Any questions? Let me stop the recording.